humblemud.
Ever since the release of Bowser's Fury in 2021, the idea of an open-world Mario game suddenly seemed less like a pipe dream and more like a real possibility. Bowser's Fury was a fresh and exciting entry for myself and many longtime fans of the Mario series, and considering how well it sold, I think if this was Nintendo's test to see how receptive to an open-world Mario we are, well, they got their answer.
Let's go!
The very idea of creating a true open-world Mario game like this presents a lot of questions though, and before answering any of them, Nintendo would have to decide what their vision and goals are. Most likely, I think the Big N will follow tradition and do what they've always done best, put Mario in a new, interesting setting and build a solid game around a brand new mechanic or extension of Mario's present abilities, but there is another option. They could instead reinvent the franchise in the way that they did with Zelda Breath of the Wild, establishing a new way of looking at the familiar locations we've grown up with over the years and taking bold risks when it comes to the exploration and game feel. And I'd argue that if Nintendo went this route, it could be even more interesting to see what they do with Mario than what they did with Zelda. While we've seen variations of Death Mountain, Lake Hylia, and the Lost Woods, just to name a few, across countless Zelda games, a great majority of fan-favorite Mario locations are one-and-dones, never to be seen again outside of spin-offs. What if we got a Mario game that changes that and supplies players with a sort of loose canonicity in the way that the Zelda games do, allowing you to revisit iconic Mario locations spanning across the history of the franchise, interacting with them in new ways, and seeing how older locations have changed with the passage of time. The idea of seeing so many key Mario locations in one game really gets my mind going as a lifelong Mario fan, and while I don't think this is necessarily the route Nintendo will go with an open world Mario, there are a lot of compelling reasons for why it's a possibility and why it makes sense. Plus, I think it's just a fun idea to explore. So as I start sharing what I imagine, what I would like to see in this fabled open world Mario game, I'd like to encourage you to think about what your favorite version of the Mushroom Kingdom is. What do you see? What game do you think of when you think of the Mushroom Kingdom? And if you were put in charge of making the first truly open world Mario game, which games would you pull from the most to make your personal best of version of Mario's lands? This is a franchise that's now 40 years old, and I think I've come up with a plot that would set the stage for an open world Mario game and celebrate all of that history really well. And in my opinion, a great way to do this would be to take a page from the Spider-Man comics playbook. Imagine Bowser forming his own Sinister Six of sorts, filled with iconic Mario villains who team up together to face off against him. This is how I'd make that make sense. One night, while Bowser is sitting atop his throne and trying to come up with his next plan to no avail, something falls from the sky and crash lands in the castle courtyard, as if it were an answer to all of his prayers. It's a mysterious, glowing black heart, and something about it is mesmerizing. Bowser takes it to Kamek to see if he knows what it might be. Kamek has never seen this before, but can tell that its energy is off the charts. He starts conducting experiments, channeling his magic through it, and discovers this black heart can warp time, dimensions, and reality itself. While it's much too dangerous to break the heart completely and unleash its power upon the lands, Kamek says that with just a quick tap of his wand, he can temporarily create a small crack and allow Bowser to make one wish before quickly sealing it back up. Bowser realizes that if he ever wishes to have true success in carrying out his plans, he has to get Mario out of the way first. So he closes his eyes and summons the most powerful foes Mario has ever faced to come together into this room with the one goal of taking him down once and for all. Through time, space, and dimension, a small army of fearsome foes appear in Bowser's throne room, and he tells them it's time. Now, before I reveal who the Sinister Six members are, I just wanted to say that if you're familiar with the Paper Mario series, you may recognize that black heart that I was talking about earlier. I wasn't just making something up. The black heart is known as the Chaos Heart, and it appears early on in Super Paper Mario for the Wii. Don't worry, I'm not going to share any spoilers here this early in the video, but I will go into more detail for you at the end when I talk about the final boss fight. That way, if you're trying to avoid spoilers for Super Paper Mario, you can't. Anyway, let's reveal who these guys are. If I had to pick who I think Bowser would appoint for his Sinister Six, I would choose Tatanga, Kamek, Fawful, King Boo, King Wart, and then one more really fun one that I'll discuss last. The game could begin with Mario sleeping underneath a tree and Luigi hanging up his clothes to dry, when all of a sudden what appears to be lightning bolts strike all around them, one of them hitting Luigi. Luigi disappears and Mario fears the worst, but he realizes that what actually happened was that Luigi was abducted by the alien Tatanga, who he hasn't seen since the events of Super Mario Land 1 and 2. The game would thus start with a boss fight, pretty rare for the series, where players would help Mario defeat Tatanga and save his brother. You could do this by using the alien's own tractor beam against him, fooling him into grabbing other objects by accident, and then hitting those objects back at his ship, and then finally jumping on the ship's dome until it breaks. After his ship comes crashing down, the two plumbers think the day is saved. However, they hear a lot of commotion and explosive sounds coming from the direction of Peach's castle, and then they realize something much bigger is afoot. Of course, as you run through the outskirts of the Mushroom Kingdom and eventually make your way to Peach's castle, you see that she's already been kidnapped, and you learn that the Mushroom Kingdom is being attacked from all angles at once. The Royal Guard, composed of pretty normal toads, provide you with a map and highlight some of the key areas that are being attacked, like New Donk City, Delfino Plaza, and Rainbow Road. These key areas that I just mentioned are the types of areas where I would imagine we would confront these other Sinister Six members, and you can choose to fight any of them in any order you choose, or of course get sidetracked with side quests. I imagine Kamek taking over New Donk City, using his magic on Petey Piranha to make him absolutely gargantuan, Petey's vines ripping through the city streets and buildings, making him this kaiju type threat where Mario has to run up the vines and knock down various stalks and spores to weaken him. Once you take down Petey, you face off against Kamek and save New Donk City from any further destruction. King Wart materializes from the dream world of Subcon and covers Isle Delfino in a shroud of fog, zapping all the color and energy from Delfino Plaza. The Piantas native to this island are forced into an eternal slumber while the streets are taken over by Shy Guys, Ninjas, Pidgeots, and other enemies that you'll recall seeing from Super Mario Bros. 2. On your way to the Amphibian Menace, you'll face off against the bomb-wielding Mauser in Hotel Delfino before you finally take on and topple King Wart himself, stopping his dream machine and waking everyone back up. And wreaking havoc across Rainbow Road would be none other than the Mario and Luigi series' wildest villain, Fawful. While Fawful has never thought highly of Bowser, getting Mario out of the picture is a mutual goal, and Fawful figures he can kill two birds with one stone by pretending to help Bowser, defeat the plumbers, and then come back and double-cross the Koopa King. In my version of the Mushroom Kingdom, connecting Rainbow Road to the Land of the Stars present in the Mario RPGs just makes too much sense, and Fawful would certainly volunteer to invade this particular region of the Mushroom Kingdom so that he could get his hands on some Power Stars. Again, this whole time he's going to be thinking for himself. Imagine racing in a cart along Rainbow Road and gathering items to throw at Fawful, who's cackling away in this giant vehicle carrying all of the Power Stars that he stole. You dodge his traps that he sets left and right until you can eventually catch up to him and then leap from the cart in order to do battle with him on top of his machine. And King Boo. What if we saw King Boo take over a 3D version of Dinosaur Land from the Super Mario World and Yoshi's Island games? Aesthetically, I think this could be a really cool blend between those classic Super Nintendo games and the Mario 3D World, 3D Land era. You could temporarily team up with Yoshi as the two of you traverse and platform through King Boo's Halloweenified version of iconic areas like Donut Plains, of course culminating in the two of you facing off against him in the haunted house located there, perhaps utilizing the cape power-up to fly through the air as a giant King Boo throws furniture at you with his ghastly powers. And then of course you could rid various Yoshi Islands afterwards of the spirits that continue to haunt that place. And now, the final member of the Sinister Six was supposed to be Wario. However, seething with jealousy for being overlooked and overshadowed yet again, I mean, he wasn't even recruited as part of Bowser's army like everyone else was. Even the Hammer Bros got picked over him. Waluigi traps his own brother and tries to carry out Wario's portion of the plan in his own demented way, to an obviously chaotic and disastrous effect. Instead of utilizing WarioWare Inc.'s resources to aid Bowser in exchange for an absurd amount of gold, Waluigi instead focuses on destruction and revenge, and channels all of his anger from routinely being sidelined and losing in various sporting events to turn WarioWare Inc. into his own twisted playground with a gauntlet of challenges for Mario to complete. Perhaps near the tail end of Mario's battle with Waluigi, he's able to open the cage holding Wario hostage, and being the classic anti-hero that he is, Wario decides to take out his brother with a good old-fashioned shoulder bash. He turns and starts to square up towards Mario, but decides today is not the day, and ultimately he apologizes for the trouble that they've caused. After defeating the bad guys who have hijacked these various areas, this could then open these areas back up for semi-regular business. However, if you want to unlock and explore everything, you'll have to help these various communities rebuild. By completing various challenges in each map, in a vein similar to Mario 64 or Mario Odyssey recovering stolen Power Stars, you could help rebuild and recover each area back to its former glory. The more stars you collect, more shopping options and side quests open up, and you can then purchase small things like a new outfit, or perhaps even gain access to power-ups. More on that later though. Getting the opportunity to run around in these big sandbox environments also gives you a nice break from the main mission of taking down the Sinister Six and the major threat. All throughout the Mushroom Kingdom, in between these key areas, would also be other smaller areas that need help, and again, I think this idea of restoring the kingdom back to the way it used to be would be a nice way to give players a sense of meaningful progress. Maybe you could enter an underground mine shaft reminiscent of the mines we see in Moleville in Super Mario RPG in order to save a Wiggler whose back half is stuck in the wall, Pooh Bear style, because the mine caved in. Maybe you could stumble upon that original first level from Super Mario Bros. And see it in that decrepit state that we saw it in Super Smash Bros. Brawl, again, finding a Power Star to help bring it back to life. And going back to my brief mentioning of power-ups, I think it would be interesting to obtain power-ups from a host of Mario's games that you could equip for temporary aid in battle or as a means of traversal. Maybe when you're in those open world areas, you could get access to various forms of flight via the Raccoon or Tanuki power-up, the Wing Cap from Mario 64, or the Cape from Super Mario World. And of course, we've got to see characters like Plessy return whenever you have to go across the water. I think his inclusion in Bowser's Fury really helped make that game what it was. He could guide you to the various islands littered around Mushroom Kingdom. Maybe you could even get a nice view of the DK Island in the background, and he could drop you off to explore underwater caverns as well. And I've always loved the airships that we first saw in Super Mario Bros. 3, so imagine a bunch of those flying in the sky that could act almost like Zelda dungeons, where you have to explore and maybe take down the Koopa Kids or some enemy that's similar to that. Maybe you could encounter specific closed-off areas manufactured by Kamek and Bowser's engineering teams, where the gravity is all over the place, and at the very end of it is a Power Star you have to get to, and of course this could act as a miniature Mario Galaxy-style challenge. Hopefully everything I've discussed here paints a good picture for you guys of what I mean when I say that an open world Mario game like this could be cool to see because it gives his universe some more cohesion and brings together elements that we often see discarded by the time his next game rolls around. A Mario game with a plot like this could act as an amazing way to celebrate the franchise's history, it could stir interest in new fans to check out his older games, and it also gives Nintendo an opportunity to tie its in-game Mario universe back to the one within the Mario movies they're creating if they so choose, by representing the Mushroom Kingdom in a way similar to what we saw in the first film, complete with details from the games to flesh it all out. And speaking of fleshing things out, there are so many little details that longtime Mario fans would see and appreciate. I mentioned the DK Island earlier, but what if we could also see a sign pointing to the Bean Bean Kingdom, which is said to border the Mushroom Kingdom? However, the road is, of course, under lockdown considering the circumstances. Maybe you could spot Rosalina's Comet Observatory in the sky while you're in the middle of that boss fight on Rainbow Road. There are a ton of things like this that we could inject into the game, and it just gets my imagination going thinking about it, but I'll stop there with those two examples and let your imaginations wander. Definitely let me know what else you would like to see. Now, for those of you who don't want any spoilers, the video will end here. However, if you want to hear how I intend to wrap this whole thing up, stay tuned. As I said earlier, the final boss fight of this hypothetical game will contain some spoilers for Super Paper Mario, which is such an underrated and beautiful game, by the way, that I highly recommend playing. So to those leaving, I understand. Thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay humble. For those of you choosing to stay though, we're jumping into this in 3, 2, 1. Mario makes his way through a slew of challenges in Bowser's castle. Enemies he thought were long gone, such as Totanga from the beginning of the game, come back as mini boss fights. But this time, he's in a giant mech suit that Mario has to figure out how to take down. I think it would also be really cool to see iconic challenges and minor bosses from other games meet Mario here as well. Eventually, the plumber gets through it all and makes his way to Bowser's throne room. Now, as I said earlier, the black heart that fell from the sky is the Chaos Heart. In Super Paper Mario, Bowser and Peach are forcibly married by one of the game's antagonists, Count Bleck, and this major upset to the natural order of things in the Paper Mario universe unleashes havoc across the realm so great that the Chaos Heart appears as a result. This heart is said to create an interdimensional rift called the Void, which, once unleashed, will consume all things. Pretty metal for a Mario game. By the end of the game, the true antagonist is revealed to be Dimencio, who, after taking control of the Chaos Heart and brainwashing Luigi, fuses with him and the Chaos Heart to become Super Dimencio. With the help of the hearts that they found along their journey, Mario and friends defeat this monstrosity, and skipping over some details, Count Bleck and Timpani come together to turn the Chaos Heart into the Purity Heart in probably the most well-written scene that a Mario game has ever had. Everything is set back to its normal state, Count Bleck has a major change of heart, and the day is saved. However, there was one quote that always stuck with me. After Dimencio's apparent defeat, the Chaos Heart is still there, so Count Bleck states that he must have left a shadow of his power behind in order to keep the Chaos Heart alive. Thus, the destruction of the universe could still happen. Of course, Count Bleck and Timpani stop this, but what if Dimencio delivered more of that energy than we initially thought? Upon the implosion of the Chaos Heart, which again causes dimensional rifts, all of that energy dispersed had to have gone somewhere, right? What if Dimencio had actually sealed a major part of himself within the Chaos Heart, more than we anticipated, more than we were aware of in that game, and the last bits of interdimensional energy left before the Purity Heart did its thing made its way out of the Paper Mario universe and into the Mario universe in an effort to consume something else. And thus, in a last-ditch effort to defeat Mario during this final boss fight, an ignorant and desperate Bowser cracks open this lesser form of the Chaos Heart, and Dimencio is unleashed yet again. In the panic of this scene, he recognizes his nemesis Mario and immediately takes over Bowser like he did with Luigi before. And so now, you're facing off against this final, supercharged form of Bowser, and it proves to be a tough fight. Just as Mario is about to be defeated and everything is turned to ruin though, a bright white light emits from the ceiling and two figures emerge from the light. It's Count Bleck and Timpani. Even as far away as they were in their happy place revealed at the end of Super Paper Mario, they were able to feel this chaotic energy emerge. Using their magic, they appeared just in time, and with the power of the Purity Hearts, they defeat Dimencio again, but this time, once and for all. The two apologize to Mario for the trouble that all of this has caused, and Dimencio's defeat clears out what remained of the Void for good. The day is saved, the Mushroom Kingdom is thriving, Nintendo announces a Super Paper Mario remaster for the Switch 2, which is the real reason I made this entire video, and humblemud is happy. Of course, none of this is ever going to happen, but this was a fun idea to explore, right? However, these are just my thoughts at the end of the day. I'm just a little guy. I'd love to know how you'd approach making an open world Mario game and what you thought of my story here. And in case you're interested, I've done similar theory crafting videos for a hypothetical Gauntlet Dark Legacy reboot and for a King of the Hill game that I wish existed. So if you enjoyed what I came up with here and wanted to hear some more of my wacky ideas, here are some similar videos. Anyways, if you're still here, thanks so much for watching, and as always, stay humble.